I'm going to cut so much of this discussion.
It's been a high quality discussion. I think you just cut out some of the kind of, the empty air.
Dead air. They call it dead air.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to Our Hero De Niro. I am Mike, here with my co-host Mike.
Hello.
No relation, of course. And this fine day, we are so excited to be here to talk to you about John Avnet's Righteous Kill.
Yeah, a real household name, John Avnet.
Yeah.
So we actually were talking about this just before we started, but you were looking into this director's filmography. So, did you find anything interesting there? Who is John Avnet?
So, what's interesting about it is I don't know that I've ever heard of a single film that he's directed, and I sure as shit had never heard of this one before. Before we rolled it last week. Had you ever heard of this movie before we rolled it last week?
No, not at all. I think I might have heard about it before, just knowing that it was one of the rare De Niro Pacino films, but no, absolutely didn't know anything about it.
So funny that there are only 4 and this is one of them.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to talk about that. So I'd never heard of this film. I'd never heard of this guy. And I just, as I said, I'd never heard of any of his films, but I'm really interested to see pretty prolific Justified director. Looks like he directed about 10 episodes of Justified over the course of the series. And
a series that we're both big fans of.
Yeah, we're both big fans of Justified here on the pod. I think it's, I loved it when it was on.
Yeah.
And it's a comfort food show for me, for sure. Kind of in the same way that the Blue Skies USA comedies are.
Psych,
I can turn on any
Collar.
episode of Justified, and it's serialized, so it's you kind of want to know what's going on, but there is a case of the week component of it, so you really can kind of pick up and watch any episode. It gets dark in the end, like a lot of those kind of anti-hero dramas do, but up until season 5, you pick up any episode and you're just gonna have a ball, laughing at Boyd's goofy aphorisms and looking at Timothy Oliphant's handsome chiseled face. And I think that time has treated it really kindly. Justified's been off the air for about 10 years now, and I think it's one of the best ever. It's really stood the test of time.
I think what you're really doing is making an early case/warning to the audience to just watch Justified instead of Righteous Kill.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're getting
I agree. I really wasn't thinking about Justified, when I watched it, because I should have looked up the director before
I didn't look it up
the
beforehand
film
either.
yesterday.
I wanted to go in totally fresh.
I don't know. Let's just get into it.
Yes.
I looked at the episodes that this guy directed of Justified. They were all pretty good ones. And let me tell you something. I think that, I don't know, the Justified showrunners must have been exerting a lot of influence over him, or maybe he developed a lot as a director between this film and his start on Justified in 2010 or whenever it must have been. But man, this movie I really did not think was very good.
Well, directing.
What did you think of this one?
Directing for TV is so different than directing a film. TV directors don't have that much control. So you're right. The showrunner is really leading that. And I think I agree with you about Righteous Kill. I'm really excited to kind of get into it. We normally we try not to talk about the movies too much before we record, so that the reactions are fresh.
That's not true.
Well, I try not to.
No.
I try not to.
I think that's a lie.
What are you talking about? I deliberately didn't tell you what I thought about this. I think that
we have talked exactly this much about every film we've watched.
I don't think that's true at all, man.
Far,
I don't think you notice, because you always just tell me your opinion.
Let's roll back the tape.
I don't want to do that.
Let's roll back the tape. You can edit that in.
Absolutely
why don't you edit in some clips? I think that'd be pretty funny, actually. You don't think that would be funny?
Yeah, why don't you go back through the episodes and find those timestamps for me? I don't want to do that.
Sure, I'll do that for you. I think that's a great idea.
Appreciate that.
And you can kind of intersperse it in this conversation we're having. Sure. I think that'll be good. I think that could be funny.
I think you're in for a rude surprise. Why don't you get into this stupid movie?
Yeah.
Righteous Kill.
Righteous Kill, 2008. It's kind of like a crime noir. And to our earlier acknowledgement, it stars Al Pacino alongside Robert De Niro, and they have got some absolutely incredible on-screen chemistry. Just two incredible guys, and two of the best guys who've ever done it. And so it's the third of 4 films that they starred in together chronologically. And so just so everybody knows what the 4 are, they're The Godfather Part 2, which is, in my opinion, the greatest film ever made.
Wow.
Heat, which
one of my
is
favorites.
Certainly up there.
Yeah.
This, and then The Irishman,
There's
which
one
I'm excited
outlier
to watch.
Yeah.
It's a flawed film, The Irishman, but it's certainly very good. And yeah, this one really, it stands out from the pack, I think, as being of dubious quality,
Yeah.
considering the star power of its main men.
I think as we discuss the movie while we recap it's important to kind of keep in mind the context here. So this was their first collaboration since Heat in '95. So it had been 13 years, and you would think that would be some kind of like milestone, but this film, it had a $60 million budget, so like a mid-budget film in the 2000s. It only made 78.5 million, so it was a flop. People did not show up for this. I think they probably rightly, like accurately assessed its quality based on the trailers and commercials and information. So yeah, let's get into this film.
I feel like, I mean, we'll get into it. I'm so excited to talk about some of my broader observations, but let's talk about just the plot. So this film opens with a montage, and you see De Niro right away. I think it's got to be in the first 30 seconds. Did you track exactly when it is?
I always do. It was 42 seconds, and
42. So not quite the first 30, but yeah, real.
Well, and this is before you derailed me with your fucking argument. This is why I made the point that normally I thought we didn't try to discuss the movies before recording. And the reason I mentioned that was because when you were 1 minute into this film, you messaged me just commenting on how bad the montage was.
Oh yeah, it was really. It was.
I thought it was so funny. Yeah, it really sets the tone for the film to come.
Yeah. So here's what I wrote for my notes, because my notes are pretty funny. Maybe we'll cut some of them out and put them verbatim in the show notes, because I was having a lot of fun taking these notes while I wrote last night. So here's what I've written: montage opening, semicolon, De Niro right away, all caps, righteous kill. Wow, this first minute is so bad. Who the fuck is John Avnet?
Hollywood.
Yeah, it really is like it. It really is like a really striking opening to the movie. I mean, it's hard to describe. I'm intrigued by what you said, that like you think that audiences may have been turned off by the trailers. I did not watch the trailers.
No, me either.
But I think from like a cinematography perspective, from like a direction perspective, like I think that visually this film is so strikingly bad that I really do think, like, in a 90-second trailer or a 2-minute trailer, you really could tell, like, there's really no way they could edit it together to hide just how bad everything looks.
Yes.
Like, and you could tell immediately. Like, it looks so bad.
So even from that opening montage, and especially once we actually see the way that the film is shot, you can tell it's like a low-budget film. I forgot the budget earlier today. I was going for a walk, and I thought to myself, it feels like a $20 million film where $18 million went to paying De Niro and Pacino salaries. And they were like, oh, we have $2 million and we chose to like set this in New York City for some reason. And we can only afford like a precinct with 3 cops in it. Like it had this distinct feel of like late aughts cheapness to it. It felt kind of like like straight to direct TV kind of vibes. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that as we go through De Niro's filmography.
I don't know.
Yeah, this is the start.
I'd like to think, and maybe I'm being naive, but as I watch this, I'd like to think this is gonna be one of the worst. I'd like to think we're getting one of the worst out of the way. You don't think so? You think this is gonna be in like the bottom 5?
I think the problem with De Niro's filmography that we're going to see is that in this period, starting, after 2000, I think he's going to be in a lot of films that are just as bad quality-wise, but that he's in a lot less, where they, paid to just get his name on the poster, essentially. So I think we're going to get a lot more movies where he has, 10 minutes of screen time. And I will give this movie credit. We see a lot of Pacino and a lot of De Niro, so you're kind of getting what you pay for in that respect, which is nice.
Okay, sure. So the montage ends.
We're 1 minute into the movie.
It cuts to a talking head interview with De Niro. And I took a note here, and I just want to call it out. I don't know what kind of jank-ass filter they elected to use for this talking head interview, but it looks so fake. I think it's supposed to look like, it'll be revealed later in the movie that it's supposed to be I think footage from a security camera. And it doesn't look like that.
No.
It looks like they recorded it on some handy cam and then put it through Windows Movie Maker with the shittiest filter they could possibly put on it. And it's you really do I agree. When I was watching this, I didn't look up the budget, but I thought low. Mm-hmm. It really feels like a B movie. Almost.
There's a cheapness, there's a laziness to the production, and that's a great example of it. Where would it really have cost that much more, or taken so much time for them to do something involving analog tape and making it? This is how you open the movie. this is it.
Right.
Like,
this is the
first
minutes.
thing
like,
that you see.
Yeah.
And it just looks, you're right, it looks like one of those default filters you apply in like Adobe Premiere or whatever. It's like they didn't even bother paying for a nice looking one. It was just like, that's where we're starting. So yeah, De Niro.
So talking head interview with De Niro, and he is talking about his kind of autobiography as a serial killer.
Yeah, he's reading a confession.
And so, so we get a flashback to a crime scene, and he's referencing this shifty character named Charlie Randall, who's a quote unquote child killer.
Yeah.
I think I can't remember exactly, but I think we see some flashes of the violence here, and he killed his girlfriend's daughter, essentially.
Let me tell you something. You can never trust someone with two first names.
It's a good rule.
Yeah.
So it cuts to a scene of him in court. And I can't remember if it was this one or a later one. It doesn't really matter. There's like a few court scenes where like somebody gets off. That's kind of like a thing about the movie. But for whatever reason, he's acquitted by the jury, and he's let off. And De Niro, his name is Turk, and his partner Rooster, who's played by Al Pacino.
Wow!
Al Pacino!
It's not Al anymore. It's Dunk.
Dunkachino?
Don't mind if I do.
They're partners, and they have an agreement after Charlie Randall is acquitted by the jury that they're going to plant a gun in his house, a small caliber gun, to frame him for another murder. He is arrested and imprisoned for this crime for which he was framed, and De Niro has a lapse of his Catholicism, a kind of crisis of faith.
Yeah, and one thing I mentioned here with the Randall situation is that De Niro is the one who incites this. He wants to break bad and plant the evidence or frame him for the crime, and then Pacino goes along with it.
Yeah, true. That is very important. Thanks for mentioning that. Yep. I got a note here. We go over to a club, and I noted how funny I think it is that "We Fly High" is the song that's playing in the club.
I also noted that was the song.
Really of its time. I think that here, you should maybe play a few bars from it for the audience if they're not familiar with the song. So you might not know it off the top of your head, and I really do think it was an extremely funny thing to hear, like funny needle drop so early in the movie. So 2008. So they're at this club. And outside of the club, they have this little exchange, about how Al Pacino's character is cheap. He never picks up tabs when they go out together, and it's like a little bit of buddy cop. Let me just observe at this point, nothing about this works for me at all.
Oh, yeah?
Like, their characters, I don't like. I think that their performances are bad relative to what we know they're capable of. And you really feel in this moment, I wanted to feel some emotion at some point in this film about these characters' relationship. And I never did. How did that all feel for you, going through it as we got to know these characters a little better?
Their relationship, it didn't quite work for me in the context of this story. So I'll explain more as we kind of reach that point in the narrative. But in terms of the quality of the performances, they kind of both feel like they're on autopilot, but maybe De Niro less so, but I thought they were both fine. I enjoyed watching them. Even them just cruising through it was still so much more captivating to watch than anyone else could have been in those roles.
Sure.
I think so much of what is wrong is just due to the quality of the script and just the overall production. So I don't want to put it on them necessarily, but it was pretty lazy, just establishing the banter, the relationship, whatever, and then we get into the club.
So go back to the club.
Yeah, so they go into the club, and they're looking at 50 Cent, who plays this guy named Spider. And Spider is a drug dealer, but they say, I think it might have been a voiceover, but it could have been a conversation. It doesn't matter. It is established at the beginning of the club scene that he's involved in other crimes as well,
he's
extortion and racketeering, and he's a bad person.
Right.
So they're there, and Robert De Niro goes into the bathroom, and he takes a piss, and a lady comes into the men's room. And she's doing a line of coke off of the sill
Not even
of the
trying
bathroom
to hide
sink. Not even trying to hide it, and she clearly doesn't realize that he's a cop who's in there with her. And they have a conversation, and she says that she got her drugs from Spider, and then the scene ends. And then we change scenes to a lady named Karen Corelli, who's played by Carla Gugino.
Oh, yeah.
Let's
Love
just
her.
stop here for a moment. Like, oh my God. There's 2008 era Carla Gugino. Like, absolutely unbelievable. What an insanely attractive woman.
I'm inclined to agree.
Just really, really crazy stuff. It's like it honestly like sort of boggles the mind a little bit. So she
The
arrives at
cast
home.
is great overall.
Oh, the cast is great. They're all
although
great. I agree.
will-
Like,
I
John
will
Leguizamo's in it. He's a fucking ball. Like 50 Cent's great in it. Like
I was
it's all
going.
really
I was
good.
going to ask, what did you think of 50 Cent's performance?
I thought it was good.
You thought he was good?
I mean, I love the guy. Yeah, he's very charismatic.
I don't, okay, so I have difficulty separating the actual quality of the performance from the fact that, like, it just, to me, it felt like really cheap stunt casting. Oh, we only have $2 million left in the budget. Are there any other names we can get, who have, like, cross-cultural appeal? Oh, get 50 Curtis St. Jackson. Or wait, Curtis 50 Cent Jackson, whatever.
Curtis, 50 Curtis Jackson.
Exactly.
Yep.
The thing about 50 Cent's performance is it feels like cheap stunt casting to me. Like, how could you see him as anything other than 50 Cent? He gets nothing to work with. He gets very little screen time. His line delivery is okay, but you're just looking at 50 Cent thinking like, what is this like film? Rob Dyrdek had a cameo. Did you notice that? Do you even know who Rob Dyrdek is?
I don't know if I do.
He's a skateboarder who used to have a few reality shows on MTV back in the day. Yeah, now he hosts Ridiculousness, like the only show left on that network. But he also had a cameo as one of the bad guys that gets clipped later on. And so that really like lit up that part of my brain that was like, oh God, this is like just the cheapest fucking movie that we're watching right now. But anyways, go on, Carla Gugino.
So Carla Gugino, she gets home. She lives in an apartment. Looks like maybe it's a walk-up. And she checks her mail. I noticed, I wrote this in my notes, she's got a New Yorker in there. And I wrote, I'd rather be watching a New Yorker or reading a New Yorker.
You'd rather watch
watching this movie. Yep.
Yeah.
So she walks into her apartment and she's accosted by a male hand. We do not see whose hand it is in her apartment. And then maybe like in the next scene, it was De Niro, and was it like a role play thing? Is that what we're supposed to guess? That they were doing some sort of kinky role play?
Yes.
I there was a lot of stuff about Carla Gugino's character that I found really confusing.
It's not a good character.
And I'm excited to talk about that stuff because like none of it made any sense to me. Like I was really confused by it, but she's great. Her performance was one of my favorites in the film. She's a really great actress. Then we shift. There's another kill.
Yeah, and that's Rob Dyrdek.
Right. Oh, so that was him. Okay,
yeah,
that's the guy.
He plays Rambo, the skateboard pimp.
Sure. So he's a pimp, and you see him send some girl off, in some contrived way that is just meant to show you, like, not only is this guy a pimp, but, he's not a very nice one. And then, you hear...
he's not one of those nice pimps.
Right, not one of those nice pimps. So the street sweeper killer, poetry boy killer, whatever they're going to call him. We'll get into that later. He comes up to him, pop, right in the face. Boom, he's dead. Then the next day, De Niro and Pacino and Carla Gugino, they are there investigating the murder.
Yeah.
So Robert De Niro is the killer, but he's also investigating the killings.
Yes. Yes.
There's a...
Go on.
I just want to say one more thing about this scene. Well, it might have been this scene, it might have been the next. I didn't say when it happened, but I noted this. De Niro calls the Department of the U.S. government, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. He calls it ICE. We call it ICE now.
Yeah.
And I didn't look it up, but did they used to call it ICE? Like, it stood out to me immediately. I was like, nobody says that. Like,
it seems
but
like
maybe it was like an
right.
anachronism.
I'm sure they always called it ICE. It's not. That's why they come up with like those acronyms to be able to say it that way. It's not like someone was like looking at a memo going, "Wait, ICE? Holy shit,
oh
Greg,
shit, that spells ice. That's incredible."
Oh, we just found this 3-letter word.
It's like you could see like maybe somebody who like wasn't very plugged in making that mistake, but like he's a cop. Like I think the cops, like especially in New York, like very diverse, kind of port city. right? Where like a lot of immigrants come in. Like I think New York City cops, they're all familiar with like, DHS and like its kind of sub departments. Like I don't know. So that was pretty silly. So now we've got the blonde lady who was doing the coke in the bathroom. She is back on the scene. So it turns out she's an attorney.
Yep.
And she was arrested, I guess, presumably by De Niro and Pacino in the previous club scene when We Fly High was playing, for doing coke in front of De Niro in the bathroom, and they flipped her to wear a wire and do a sting on Spider. So she goes in, and this scene is like. So I watched this movie with Caroline Badcree, who did our art, and like as soon as this scene ended, Caroline was like, "Oh, this lady's fucking cooked," and like it's like the storytelling here is so ham-fisted, just like the way the scene is written. They like make a point to like highlight the fact that they want her to buy like 4 ounces of cocaine, which is like
totally insane.
I don't know. I mean, let's think about it. Like I'm trying to think about like how much coke costs. It's quite expensive, right? Like it's thousands of dollars. Right, but I mean, like, per kilogram, right, which is the way, per kilo, it's thousands of dollars. So an ounce is 1/16 of a pound, and a kilo is like, about 2.5 pounds. So there's like about 40 ounces in a kilo, and that's thousands of dollars. So she's going in to buy like $500 to $1,000 of coke, just like rough numbers.
Yeah, just
and
a totally
buys,
normal
like,
thing to
bump.
do. Yeah.
So they like have this conversation, and it's like, yeah, this is fucking insane. Like he's obviously gonna see through this immediately. Like this lady who like buys for one night, like like $50 or $100 or whatever she usually spends. Like all of a sudden she's like, I want to buy in bulk. Like seems pretty sus.
You sussy baka.
So it's very ham-fisted the way this is all introduced. And so he goes in, and Spider immediately realizes that she's wearing a wire. The cops are listening through the wire, so they can tell like that things are going bad, and so they go in and they have an altercation with Spider and with his fat bodyguard, and there's a shootout with the fat bodyguard.
His name was
he
Stubbs.
gets killed. Stubbs, sorry, excuse me. Stubbs. Stubbs, the fat bodyguard.
All right,
he's
Stubbs.
killed, and the blonde attorney is shot. Man, there is a line here that. I don't know. It's tough to say. I think a lot of terrible stuff happened, but when it happened, I wrote it down because I thought it might be the worst line in the movie. She says, if they ever need a lawyer, they can call her. And, like, the way that it's written is so stupid, and the way she delivers it is so bad. And I was just like, oh my God, what is this? Like, they shot that, and they were like, ship it. Like, that's the one. This is the take for us.
Yeah, the character, this lawyer character, Jessica, is, to me, very unbelievable. Like, the fact that she comes back in the movie later on, and I just could not believe that she would want to interact with these cops in any conceivable way. Like, they don't seem to be very good. They clearly set her up to fall there in that situation. You think she'd be like doing everything she could to like stop and like sue them or whatever. Like, this is totally unjust, because they were going to get her killed. They barely got there in the nick of time. They're like slow jogging because they're 65 years old or whatever. Oh my God.
Doesn't make any sense. So the sting fails. And De Niro and Pacino they're not put on desk duty. It doesn't seem like it, right? They're still out in the field, but they're seeing a department therapist starting at this point.
And Internal Affairs is investigating them.
And that's right. An IA is investigating them. Yep. Hey, I think I've done a really good job so far.
Yeah,
right?
man,
You're so critical. I think I've done a really good job so far. And this movie makes no sense, by the way. So, like, not only was this the one where I committed this week, I was like, I'm going to take really detailed notes. It also was the most nonsensical, hardest one to understand. Like, it was so much harder to understand than whatever that first one was called. What was it called?
Greetings.
Greetings, the De Palma film. Yeah. Like, that movie was confusing, but, like, it was confusing in an artistic way.
Uh-huh.
Like, this is just bad storytelling. Like, it was legitimately difficult to follow the plot at all times for me. So I really struggled with it. I need to dust my notes off before we hopped on here and make sure I understood what was happening. So anyway, so yes, they're being investigated by IA, as you said, and they're talking to this department therapist. And so this becomes a new this becomes a new frame for the story. We're going to cut away to conversations that they are having individually, not together, with the therapist frequently. And there's a lot to say about the scenes with the therapist. I hate them. I think that there's this way that they are shot that I think I understand like what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they're shot with like very close up shots, but with the camera kind of askance. Like the actors are always like a little bit off center. And I think like in some cases, like significantly off center, like kind of off to the corner of one of the shots. And I think that it's meant to be disorienting, kind of like a Dutch angle would be, but it like doesn't work at all. It just looks really stupid. Like it just looks like they like didn't know how to point the camera.
Yes.
So what's your take on
I
these
have
scenes?
two thoughts here. One, I think that some of those shots of De Niro and Pacino were intended to be like, I think they were trying to get it to kind of look like a confessional. But
Okay.
So I think maybe that was like kind of what they were going for. But the best way I can describe these sequences with the psychologist is, you remember that commercial? Like you wouldn't download a car about like illegal music downloading. It's kind of shot like that, where it's about of like it's a lot of like rapid, quick cuts that kind of like pan very quickly out of frame, like into the next one, and that was one of those examples that to me looked so like 2000s cheap, like direct to satellite kind of film.
Yeah. So I hate them. I think that's fair. I think that's a good read on what they were trying to do, but like it doesn't work at all. And I think that the scenes with him are bad. So something important happens in this first scene, though. He gives them each a little journal and asks them to write down their thoughts and feelings, as they're processing stuff. All right. So that all happens, and now we cut to a rapist. And his charges, so this is what I was thinking of. So the first guy really was just acquitted. So this was the court case I was thinking of. This guy's charges are dropped due to some kind of chain of custody issue with the evidence. I think the specifics are like pretty unimportant. But the point is, De Niro and Pacino are really, really pissed about it.
Yeah.
And so De Niro kills him. He's his 12th victim.
Yeah, I want to say something about this. De Niro, these characters, De Niro and Pacino's characters, they also, like, none of this really works. De Niro's character is in court. The verdict comes through for that rapist, and De Niro, like, cannot handle his shit at all. He, like, gets in the guy's face. He starts calling him a mutt. And I was just thinking, like, this guy's been on the force for, like, decades, and maybe there's a good story here about just the weight of the world, like, finally crushing him and his inability to deal with it. But they just kind of make him seem like he is just perpetually like a hothead in a way that, like, I don't know how he could last on the force for that long. It was really bizarre.
Yeah. So so that's really true. Really good point. I was going to observe that. And the thing that I want to observe here is, like, so he kills the guy, right? Mm-hmm. And so here's what I wrote in my next paragraph. I wrote, how is nobody looking at De Niro for all of these murders?
Right.
There have been 12, and he's connected to most of them. And, like, I felt it really explicitly here in this scene, because he had this really public altercation with the guy, like, the day before he was killed. No one
noticed. Like,
wouldn't he be fucking suspect one?
The judge wasn't like, well, this one detective who was just hanging out there did start yelling at the guy.
I did
had
note
motive.
here.
Okay.
Yep. Now I can't remember who said this, but I did write this down because it was a line that really made me laugh. Maybe you can remember who said this. Roses are red, violets are blue. I want to poke your eyes out with my dick, you fuck. As like a fake poem by somebody whom he's having an altercation with. I thought that was really good writing. It was probably my favorite writing in the whole movie. Do you remember what the context of it was?
I don't remember where it was, man. I don't know. Maybe it'll be in my notes as we progress through this.
So anyway, now in a way that is, I think, even more absurd in the context of the conversation you and me just had. So this is the point where the department starts investigating this serial killer, and De Niro and Pacino are selected to be the lead investigators. And it's like, again, the incitement for this being made an official investigation and having senior detectives assigned to it was the killing of this 12th guy who had a very public altercation with the person who's been assigned to be the lead detective, like, the day before he was killed. It's so absurd. Like, it's just like, this for me is where it really started to break down. Like, this was happening, and I was like, all right, like it was kind of brain dead, like a little bit stupid, like low quality storytelling. But this is the point where I was like, it's just absurd. Like this would never happen. It's so ridiculous. It completely took me out of it. It would never happen.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% here. When they're investigating this crime, I noted this is another production thing, how cheap, because they're in this like high rise apartment, right? And it
Yep.
there was the most obvious green screening ever for like the New York City background. It looked like a Windows screensaver, just like that quality of 3D animation. like you would have been impressed when it came on like Windows Millennium Edition or whatever 20 years ago. Yeah. I was just like, oh my God, like they really ran out of budget here. That's why I thought it was lower budget than it was. And yeah, I totally agree. Like, what are the odds that they were the ones put on it? But the odds are actually pretty high because it seems like there are only like 6 cops in this entire department or this entire precinct because there's De Niro and Pacino. Carla Gugino, she's another detective who does forensic stuff, and then you have 2 like competing detectives, Donnie Wahlberg and John Leguizamo, and then there's the lieutenant, and like that's it. There's like no one else in this entire fucking force. It's crazy.
That is true. Yep. The scenes all feel empty. That's where a lot of the cheapness comes from, I think. There's one scene in particular, I think it's around this point where Pacino and De Niro are sitting together in like a bar or a restaurant having a conversation, and it's shot with like this really narrow angle so you can't see anything else that's happening in the restaurant, and it just makes it feel so fake. Like there's nothing done with the way any like scene is constructed to establish like any real sense of place or of like any activity or emotion or like anything happening around them, and it makes it feel so sterile and so cheap and like, you know, it's so bad.
Well, I want to second that too, because I actually made a note during that scene about the color grading, which is also it's classic super blue, like digital cheap color grading, like obviously trying to go for like this cold emotional tone, whatever, but failing because it's just bathing the scenes in this like unnatural hue. And I notice it a lot in like lower budget movies that just have this cheap look. So I should make a tag for it on my Letterboxd reviews. I just think blue ass movie. And it's one of those. Like Righteous Kill is a blue ass movie. That is the shorthand. That is how you know, like, oh, this is just very cheaply made. Oh God, yeah. The look is consistently ugly throughout.
Yes, really bad. So there's a really ugly scene here. The next scene. This is, I think, one of the ugliest scenes in the film. So now they're the lead investigators, and then there's Donnie Wahlberg and John Leguizamo are also cops. Like, and to your point, they're like 2 of the 4 other cops who were in this precinct besides the main characters. And so because they're the only 2 other cops in there besides Carla Gugino, they are assigned to be the sort of backup investigators on the case. And it's important to note here that like this is something that I did not think was established in any kind of way other than like really obliquely. But like I guess apparently John Leguizamo and Carla Gugino are exes. Yeah. And so like there's some sort of love triangle dimension to this here that like doesn't work at all because De Niro is with Carla Gugino. And so now they're in the scene. It's a terrible scene. They're in like a gym, and like the gym like looks so cheap.
Oh yeah.
And just like the way this scene is shot, like the cinematography of it is so bad, and like the way it's color graded looks so bad. And in this scene, I think in the previous scene in the high rise, right, is when the realization first happens. In that previous scene in the high rise, you referenced.
Don't you take your notes in chronological order?
Well, I didn't write that down.
Do you memento yourself?
I did not write that down. I did not remember that scene. But gotcha. I remember what happened in that scene, which is that's the scene where I think it's Pacino's character, right? Realizes it must be a cop based on like all the stuff about it. And so De Niro's really argumentative. He says, not going to be a cop. Very suspiciously, like, of course he would say that. He's the killer. And so then we're in the weightlifting scene. And so the weightlifting scene, they're all lifting weights. And, like, it's so contrived because, like, they're having this conversation but like they're having this like really serious conversation where they're kind of like arguing with each other and like getting really passionate at the same time that they're like lifting the weights, and so they're having trouble like talking through their exertion, and like it was just so terrible.
Good.
Such a terrible scene. And so De Niro suggests that this lieutenant who was fired for being crooked and who's disgraced, may be the killer. And so John Leguizamo and Donnie Wahlberg, they go to a stakeout at the lieutenant's apartment, and I don't really understand what happened here. Did you understand? Was De Niro in his apartment at the same time that they were staking him out looking at his computer? Is that what we're supposed to understand was happening? Or was he somewhere else?
Where was De Niro?
Yeah, because in this scene, they're in the stakeout. They're staking out the house, but it's interspersed with cuts to De Niro like looking at a computer and finding evidence of connection to the victims, essentially. Like the owner of the computer had been doing research into the victims. Like that's what he sees there. And I did not understand whose computer that was supposed to be in that scene.
No, I don't know. I didn't think that's what you were going to talk about.
Well, I don't know. I wrote it down because it didn't make any sense to me. So anyway, the lieutenant comes out. Do you remember what this character's name was? I don't remember this character's name.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, doesn't matter. So the lieutenant comes out. He accosts Leguizamo in the car. He points his gun at him, and then Donnie Wahlberg comes out and points his gun at him.
Yeah, I thought that was a weird move by this lieutenant. Like he realizes, he's like, oh, I'm being tailed by the cops. Like they're investigating me for something, and instead of just like knocking on the window, going like, hey, I caught your tail. Can we talk?
Hey, what's up, bud?
He like pulls his gun on Leguizamo. Like, what was he thinking there? Not a great idea.
Right, and then they don't arrest him for it.
Well,
like,
Donnie Wahlberg
dude, you can't pull a gun on a cop.
Yeah. Code of honor.
So then Donnie Wahlberg comes and he points his gun at him, and Caroline noted that, and this is a funny observation that she made. We can link this in the show notes as well. That what this scene reminded her of was the Michael Scott improv scene from The Office, where all the characters are just pulling guns on each other. Like that's like the only thing Michael can think of.
Think about this. What is the most exciting thing that can happen on TV or in movies or in real life? Somebody has a gun.
I think the storytelling of this film is kind of on that level. So I thought the scene was totally ridiculous. Because to your point, like, why would any of these people be doing this? Like, I think that it doesn't matter whether you used to be a police officer or like what the specific circumstances are of it. I think if you pull a gun on a cop, you're gonna get arrested. Like, I think that's like, I don't know. Seems like a pretty reasonable expectation. I mean, I don't know. Is that your experience?
I don't know. Man. I've never tried.
Yeah. That all happens. Whatever. Doesn't really matter. I don't even remember. What was the resolution of that scene? Like, they just leave, right? Like, nothing really happens with it.
The lieutenant was able to provide an alibi for, like, all of the nights of the murders.
Okay, he's got an alibi. Yep.
Yeah, so they know it's not him.
Okay, so now we get on to the next kill, right? And the next kill is a diddler priest.
Yep.
So the diddler priest is killed, and in the next scene, where again, De Niro and Pacino and Gugino and Leguizamo and Wahlberg, they're investigating, and De Niro tells Pacino that priest gave him his first communion. All right, so it finally happens in the next scene. Finally, Robert De Niro is questioned by his lieutenant, the sixth police officer in this precinct, about his connections to the murder. He denies it, and the lieutenant seems to believe him. Then, like, a bunch of other shit happens that, like, I don't know. Did any of this stuff happen that happened matter to you before De Niro is, like, put on desk duty? I feel like there were, like, 10 minutes there, and, like, none of it seemed important to the plot.
All that mattered was Leguizamo and Wahlberg, they start investigating this theory that De Niro is potentially the serial killer, and they bring it to the lieutenant, and we see De Niro talking to the lawyer lady at this baseball game that he's umpiring. Like, she comes to visit him, which, again, I'm just thinking, like, he got you shot like a week ago.
Well, there can only be like 9 people in the movie, so like...
That's true. They could only afford 9. Craft services was expensive. That was a big line item. All those ham sandwiches.
Oh, I wish I had a ham sandwich.
Yeah.
So that scene happens. He says, like, his daughter used to play baseball, and like now she's... What did he say she was doing? Like,
she's like sober and living across the country. She's 25 or whatever. But De Niro just stuck around just for the love of the game.
Sure. So now De Niro's on desk duty. He's really, really pissed about it.
Yeah.
And we see that Carla Gugino is at a class. She calls up De Niro. She tells him that she can't see him that night because she has to stay at a class late. but we see she's actually going to meet John Leguizamo. And I think it's sort of confusing. Like, we're supposed to wonder, right, if this is like a romantic tryst or if she's informing. That's what we're supposed to wonder as viewers, right?
Yeah.
By this. Really stupid. So then a lot of stuff happens, and like this is where I start to get, I think, like pretty confused about a lot of stuff. So I can't remember the exact chronology of all the rest of the stuff that happens, but like now we get to the final attack, right?
Why do you need to
De Niro
remember it?
is
Aren't you
out,
taking notes?
right, De Niro is out with Pacino,
I just
they're
don't
watching
understand your
this.
system.
They're watching this big Russian guy.
Oh, God.
And he's some kind of scumbag, like some kind of Russian mobster. But they're having a conversation about something totally unrelated. And then it cuts to a scene where De Niro shoots the Russian guy. And I wrote here that it really does seem like he wants to get caught. And that was a reference to a previous line. I can't remember if it was John Leguizamo who said it or maybe the lieutenant of the department. But somebody says, like, clearly this killer wants to get caught. Like, it isn't enough for him anymore to be doing the killings. Like, he wants, like, the notoriety. Like, he wants everybody to see, like, how smart he was to have been able to get away with this for so long. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess. I don't know. It doesn't really make any sense.
I'm trying to piece through the two scenes that you skipped just to see if there was anything important. Pacino does try to make the case for De Niro. He meets Wahlberg and Leguizamo at a bar,
right, yep.
and he brings the mother of Charles Randall's victim, has her kind of like speak to them, and then like sends her on her way. And then the other thing too is that Pacino is trying to help De Niro like stay calm. Like they're talking in the precinct kitchen, and De Niro is just like losing his shit. He's like, oh, he cannot keep it together. And Pacino is like telling him to like cool off, like take it easy. Then we get into that situation with the Russian, and I think you are really like, I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, but I think you missed like a really important detail about this sequence and the priest killing. They are presented in a first person view. We do not actually see like an external shot of De Niro shooting either of these people. But like in the case of the Russian, he's like kind of walking to his car. He turns around, he says, "Hey, detective." And then we see, 6 bullets go into the guy.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like that'll maybe come back later.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that's going to come back later. I mean, I think it's important to note here, right, while we're acknowledging this, because this is going to become really important within the next 5 minutes, we've never actually seen De Niro do one of the killings.
Right.
By this point. Which is why I didn't mention it, just so you know, like, you can cut this in post if you want to, but, like, we hadn't acknowledged it at any previous point, so, like, why would it be more important here that the ways
why didn't you acknowledge the fact that these were, like, first-person shots?
Because I didn't want to give it away.
I don't think you're giving it away. I think you're just, like, describing the way.
If I choose to spotlight that,
it's hard to know. It's hard to know what you're omitting intentionally and what you just seem to have forgotten in the one day since you saw the movie.
Oh, my God. All right, so... The Russian survives the shooting.
Good for him.
And now he's an eyewitness. He's in the ICU.
Yeah, he's not doing well.
And, De Niro says in his narration that he is going to do something unforgivable. And so this, for me, is the most confusing thing about the film. I don't understand this at all. So he says he's going to do something unforgivable, and then we see Carla Gugino get attacked and, like, maybe raped. And then she calls and she's like, he did it, whatever, etc. And like, I don't know. I kind of think maybe we should come back to it because I think we need to explain what's going to happen in the rest of the movie. And then we can try to understand like why this scene happened, like with the context of the twist. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. I will just
say that I agree with your interpretation of how it was presented in that scene.
Yep. So now we get to the final, the kind of final sequence of the film. So the cops are doing a sting on De Niro. They know he's the killer, and so they somehow contrive to draw him to Spider's hideout because they know that he hates Spider, and they think that he could be, basically like, goaded into killing him. While there's some kind of surveillance on him. I think they were looking at like security cameras or something.
Yes, they're using 50 Cent for bait at his club.
Yes. So that happens. De Niro goes, and they have an altercation and an argument, and finally De Niro does pull his gun and point it at him. And then the cops come in and they're like, oh, we got you. You were going to do it. And you got a poem on you. And so he shows them the poem. And I don't remember exactly what it said, but like the point of the poem is that like he obviously knew it was a sting when he was coming in and wrote the poem, so it would be clear that he knew that. It's a joke poem. Yep. And so they're like, oh my God, De Niro didn't do it. And so like here's this next thing in the movie doesn't make any sense to me at all.
I can't wait to hear what you think the next thing in the movie is.
So the next thing in the movie is John Leguizamo and Donnie Wahlberg leave. And for some reason, they leave De Niro alone with 50 Cent, even though he just like threatened to kill him. Like that's what happened, right? They just like leave. They're just like, oh, we'll leave you two people here alone together, and it read as total nonsense to me. Like this is another thing that would never happen. Like
that's a pretty good point. I didn't really think about that in the moment, but as soon as they realized that their sting failed, they just like because tensions were running high. Leguizamo and De Niro were about to get into a fight, and so I think Wahlberg kind of like has him and Leguizamo leave to like not get into the fight. But you're right. They just left. Like De Niro did seem to want to kill 50 Cent.
Right, and like wouldn't 50 Cent, like a violent criminal, maybe want to get some like retaliation?
There's no one watching
him.
Anymore,
like, I think you'd separate them to protect them both from each other. Like it's so stupid. It doesn't make any sense. So everybody leaves. That happens, and so then here's the big twist moment. So De Niro's sitting on the couch, and Al Pacino walks back in, and he points his gun at 50 Cent, and he shoots him in the head.
Boom, headshot.
And he flies out a window, and here's where I want to talk about something about the cinematography. He flies out the window and hits the ground, and he's dead. And so here I want to acknowledge something that's been happening for the whole film. Okay. It's something that I hate. This movie has really bad slow-mo. Like, I don't like bad slow-mo, but like in this film, it's like particularly egregious. Like it's some of the worst I've ever seen. I think
it's that classic slow-mo where they didn't like shoot it at a higher frame rate. And they just like
still
shot
24
it at 24
FPS,
but
like,
just have to drag it out. So yes, it looks, every technique they use looks so cheap. Like you can tell what they're going for with this film, tonally, story wise, whatever doesn't work. It really doesn't work.
Not working. So that happens, and so now we know. Like we're like, oh, something fishy is going on here. And so now we're to the frame. Like this scene is the frame narrative. This is the narration that Robert De Niro is doing. And so, we need to reference something that neither of us acknowledged earlier. So maybe 2 or 3 scenes prior, De Niro and Pacino have a conversation about the little journals the therapist had given them. And Pacino's like, hey, you're writing in your journal? And De Niro's like, no, man.
No,
I'm not
are you kidding me?
And Pacino's like, you should. It's good for you. And he pulls his out of his breast pocket, and he kind of like flips it open so he can see there's a lot of text in it, but he won't let him read what it actually says. And De Niro's like, you're not going to let me read it? And Pacino's like, no. And so like this scene to me, like this is another ridiculous scene. And like you and me, I think like you and me in our lives are probably close in the same way that Pacino and De Niro are. And so this scene was like totally ridiculous to me. So like they're having this conversation about their private diaries that they're keeping. And like De Niro seems like offended that Pacino doesn't want to let him read it. And Pacino seems to think it's like normal that he feels that offense. And it's like, I don't know, man. It's not normal to think that your friend should let you see his private journal. Like everyone's entitled to their private thoughts. Like it's like a totally ridiculous scene. And like the filmmakers seem to also want us to think it's weird that he won't let him read it. And it's like, I don't think he would. I think 49 out of 50 like male friendships having this conversation, they would not let each other read the journal. But like that doesn't seem to be the vantage point of the film. I think we're supposed to see this in the context of what the twist is and how this all plays out and be like, oh, that was suspicious that he wouldn't let him read it. Like, no, it isn't. Yeah. It was like the least suspicious thing ever.
De Niro's upset that Pacino won't let him read his diary. Like, dude, you're 65 years old, man.
So that scene happened. So we know that Pacino is writing in his diary and De Niro is not writing in his diary. Now we get the frame story. And here's what the frame is. The frame is they are like, they're having like a chase or something. Like I don't really understand like what happened here. But, like they're chasing each other and then like Pacino drops his diary and I don't know, like I don't really understand. Like I don't understand like this last scene at all. So like maybe you can help me understand like the mechanics of like what happened between the characters. So they're having this chase and like Pacino drops the diary and like Robert De Niro picks it up and starts reading it. And like he stops to read it, and he seems like he like reads a lot of it, like enough of it to understand what's going on. But like somehow, even though Al Pacino was running away from him, they still end up together again. Like I don't really understand what happened there. But anyway, that all happens. Like, do you understand what happened here? Like mechanically, like what happened in this scene? None of
No,
the end of
I
this
think it
makes
was
any sense
just
to me.
poorly. I think it was just implausible because Pacino
Yeah.
did have that head start.
Yeah, so that all happens. And so now Robert De Niro has the journal, and here's the twist. The twist is Al Pacino's been the killer all this time. And so Turk, I'm kind of confused about the names.
Yeah, what are you doing right now?
Which one's whom? So Turk is the killer.
I think Turk
right?
is Pacino.
Right, Turk is Pacino.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. So in Wikipedia, it says that Robert De Niro is Turk. And I was like, no, I think that's the twist. So for the whole movie, we have thought, like we know that the killer is the one who's named Turk, David Fisk. And we have thought for the whole film that that is Robert De Niro. But it is revealed that the narration that De Niro is giving is him reading Pacino's diary.
Yeah,
And
why
so
didn't you mention that before the shootout that occurs after?
What do you mean? No, the
shootout.
shootout hasn't happened yet.
Okay.
You're confused. This is two separate scenes. The shootout's coming later. That's part of what doesn't make any sense to me about this at all. I think you should go back like after the podcast and you should watch the final 15 minutes of the movie again because it is nonsense.
I'd really rather.
I am describing what happened, and like the reason why you are confused is because it earnestly doesn't make any sense. Like it's like very confusing. Because the shootout happens afterward. Like the shootout happens after all this shit that I'm describing. So there's this part where it is revealed, right? So De Niro is reading Pacino's words in the diary as narration. We've been led to believe from the whole film that he is reciting his own experience having done the killings, but he's actually reciting this. And so it turns out that David Fisk, Turk, the poetry boy killer, is actually Al Pacino. And there's a lot of stuff that like the movie thinks is like really clever about this reveal. And so
Yeah,
like,
real
let me say
usual
what some of these
suspects.
things are. So like one thing is that early in the narration, De Niro talked about how he thought his partner, whom we thought was Pacino, but it's actually Pacino talking about De Niro, was like the platonic ideal of the cop. He like really looked up to him.
My role model,
and,
whatever.
Yeah. So now it is revealed that it wasn't De Niro who has a crisis of conscience and faith due to the gun planting on Randall, but it was actually Pacino who had the crisis of conscience and faith. And it wasn't about doing it, that made him feel that way. It was the fact that De Niro wanted to do it. Like he thought that De Niro was like the perfect cop, and now he saw that like everyone is corruptible, everyone is corrupt, and so that was part of his like transformation to like becoming a killer.
That's what
was like
set
losing
him
his
down
faith
that
in
road.
like the law and institutions and like morality and orderliness. So that's one thing. The other thing that it thinks is like really clever about this is the way that it treats like the whole priest thing. Like, and this was another thing that like really didn't make any sense to me. So you tell me if this made sense to you. It is De Niro who says that he was his priest, right?
Yeah.
So was he both of their priest? Like,
I mean,
is that what we're supposed to think?
They go to that church together.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, this really didn't make any sense to me. But the point is, like, this is supposed to be, like, a big moment. Like, it's like, oh, like, you thought you saw De Niro doing the killings, but, like we talked about a few minutes ago, you never actually saw any of them. Like, and it was all a trick. Like, and it's just, like, it sucks. Like, it really sucks as a twist. I feel like it adds nothing. But
yeah, I guess let's stop and talk about... So you thought this twist sucked, huh? Yeah, how did you feel about it overall? Yeah.
About the twist overall?
Or just how it recontextualizes the movie and everything. Like, so it didn't work for you.
Didn't work for me at all. How'd you feel about it?
This is interesting. It actually kind of worked for me because
I'm happy for you. Yeah.
Yes, and here's why. Because when I was watching this film, because you immediately, like, you just see, this is like, oh, this is just like cheap late 2000s junk. All it has are the names of Pacino and De Niro. And so I'm watching the film and I'm thinking it doesn't look good. The script isn't very good. Doesn't seem to make a ton of sense. And I just kind of kept lowering my standards to its level to the point where when we see De Niro, when we cut to the fake security cam footage of him reading the confession, about like halfway through the film, I thought to myself, what is the climax going to be? He's been caught, he's confessing. Like, is this movie really like this bad? And so it was a pleasant surprise when there was a twist, and I was like, oh no, they wanted to do something, and I don't know if it really works, but I appreciated that it at least did that bare minimum. And it was kind of fun to think about, but I don't know if it really serves the story well, because then you just think, well, what is this story about? And I think you probably want it to be like this character study about Pacino's character, since he was the one committing the murders. And sure, we get the exposition, whatever, through his journal, but it's the sort of thing. It's like Dexter. You want to learn about the psychology of Dexter.
I have no idea what hammer time is, or how it differs from regular time.
Not Dexter's friend, Masuka or whatever. It just it didn't really work for me. So I'm kind of glad they had it, but I didn't think it was a particularly good twist.
Sure. I mean, that's fair. I do think it elevates it, but I think it elevates it from like an F- to like a D-.
Yes.
So I do agree. It is it is a net positive for the film, but it isn't good. It doesn't justify the rest of the story.
Right.
And
because
the
characters are never that interesting. De Niro and Pacino, both of them as detectives. Pacino, he's just always presented as pretty cool, pretty level-headed, kind of a jokester. De Niro is always just flying off the handle, and that's all we ever really see of them.
And that's the thing, that's true. These characters suck. And De Niro in particular, he's loathsome.
Yes.
He seems just like a really shitty guy. So, yeah. Well, let's talk about the rest of what happens narratively,
there's
and then
not much left.
we can get more into it. So, yeah, we're pretty much at the end here, right? So they get into a chase after this frame scene ends. So now we're caught up, right, at this point. We're in the last 10 minutes of the movie, and we are caught up with the frame narrative. So now we're going to see what happened after the frame narration happened. So Pacino runs away. There's a chase. And finally, somehow De Niro catches up to him. Again, just mechanically, I don't understand what happened in the scene at all. But he catches up to him, and I guess there's a door that was locked from the inside somehow in this warehouse, which I feel doesn't happen. It's a huge fire code violation.
Doesn't seem safe.
But for some reason, Pacino can't get out of this warehouse, and so he's cornered. And so they're there, and Pacino wants De Niro to shoot him, and so he starts taking pot shots. Obviously, not actually trying to shoot him, but kind of shooting in his general direction to try to goad him into shooting him back. It doesn't work. And so finally, Pacino actually aims his gun at him, and De Niro puts him down. And so they go, Pacino's on the ground. De Niro walks over to him. They have an emotional conversation, and De Niro calls the paramedics. He says, "Officer down, officer down." Calls the paramedics. And then Pacino's like, "No, let me go," or whatever he says, don't call the paramedics, let me go. And so De Niro just calls them off and lets him die. And I took a note here.
What's that?
Why would he be allowed to do this? He said officer down. Wouldn't they want to investigate?
Well, that's the thing that I thought was even if he called back and was like, "Nope, my bad, everything's totally cool," wouldn't they still investigate that? That is not a light, right. I'm reporting a jaywalker or whatever. I don't know. You think they would still send a cop car out or something?
Paperwork's going to get filed.
Right.
Yep. So really stupid. So Pacino dies. So that happens. And then De Niro, he becomes the coach of that girls' youth baseball team he's been watching. He's got Carla Gugino there with him. She's cheering. And the movie ends. There you go. So that was righteous kill.
But I noted the ending, actually, because like you said, we catch up to the framing device of De Niro reading Pacino's confession to the security camera. So we're done with the narration, because that has been the only narration up until that point in the movie was the security footage. But at the very end of the movie, we get more voiceover narration from De Niro, who says some bullshit, and then it ends. And I thought that was such a lazy, poorly thought out choice. They just needed to wrap it up in a bow, and they were like, well, we haven't had any narration from this character at all. All the other narration was like coming from a different source entirely, but just overlay it and wrap it up, and whatever. We were running out of money in 3, 2, 1 now. And I just thought it was such a shitty way to end.
That's fair. I didn't think about it, but you are correct. Yeah, so that's the film.
Righteous Kill.
Let me call out my notes that I took that did not come up organically during the film. So I noted in my technical notes very early in the film how weird it is structurally to have it revealed as early as it is that De Niro is the killer. I wrote, what is the point of this? And so I think the twist reveals that was the point of it, right? And I think that's part of what doesn't work about it to me, to be honest, is that it's almost really so obvious that there's gonna be a twist. I think I called probably about 45 minutes in that De Niro wouldn't be the killer.
Right.
It took me until about 10 minutes before the reveal to realize that it was Pacino, but it is so obvious so early in the movie, just from a basic storytelling perspective, that nothing about the way they're framing this makes any sense dramatically if there isn't going to be some third act reveal about it. And it totally eroded any suspense I was feeling. It's just it's so poor from a
agree. I think it deflates the tension.
Yeah.
Because the entire time you're thinking okay, they got him. This is just such a bad. It just seems like a bad framing device in a bad movie. And so it does something a little clever in having a twist later on, but it's it didn't make you more invested in the film up until that point. What purpose did that serve?
Oh yeah, I completely agree. So I noted that. And I thought this was striking, and I wonder if you really noticed this as well. The actual original score of this film is it's unbelievably bad. I think that all of the songs are really bad, but in particular, it employs with relatively little restraint these sort of noir, film noir horns constantly, sort of droning horns, and it just is so stupid. It feels like a Saturday Night Live sketch. It's it doesn't work for me at all. I thought the music and sound design was it was a really sleeper, really bad thing about it. It's you're focused on the visuals and how bad the writing is, but if you really stop to listen, it sounds really bad too.
Stop to listen. Every aspect of the production just felt cheap, and that definitely goes for the music, for the soundtrack. Totally forgettable.
Yeah. In my literary notes here, I wrote there wasn't anything to say about it during it, so this is just kind of a wind down that I wrote. So I'm just going to read this verbatim. What the fuck is there even to say about this? Completely vapid law enforcement porn. Nothing ever happens to make us think Poetry Boy was doing anything wrong, but that seems to be the vantage point of the film. Completely ineffective storytelling. I think that we've talked about this. This keeps coming up. We talked about it last week, right? This concept of moral hazard. We think about moral hazard and the way that we assess our own experiences in our lives. We think about things that that characters do. There's this idea that there's this sort of baked in danger to your moral character or your quality as a person in doing things, and I think that's a hard needle to thread. If you want to make a reader or viewer or consumer of art feel that the moral hazard is real, because it's very clear we are supposed to think that killing these 14 people that the Poetry Boy killer killed was bad, and you should just trust the police, but all we see for the whole film is that I don't know, these people are getting away with it. They're gaming the system, and they're violent likely recidivists who are out on the streets, and somebody's killing them, and it's I don't know, I'm rooting for him, right? Were you? There was never any point where I was oh, this has gone too far. I think this guy's really out of control. No, he's just killing a bunch of people who seem like a drag on the world, in every way. And that's obviously not reality. In real life, it would be bad to do this because people are complex and have the opportunity for redemption and whatever. But that's not the way any of these characters are sketched out. We're given no reason to think there's anything bad about any of this. What did you think about that?
I agree. It's not a subtle film. It's a quick film. Really, it feels a little rushed, which is, not something that I say often. And so in an hour and 41 minutes, they're trying to tell this tale, but you're right, there's nothing there. There's no complexity to the moral weight of Pacino's decisions here, because, you know, each victim they present for 30 seconds or a little flashback, and they basically go, yeah, this guy was the hugest piece of shit ever and totally deserved justice, but
child
didn't get
molester
any.
who then
Right.
killed one of the children he molested. Like,
Right.
oh, boo-hoo. Like,
Right.
how could they let this guy get killed?
So then you just cut to a first-person view of Pacino killing the guy, and it's like, yeah, okay, like, whatever. There's nothing there that ever makes the killer, even when we think it's De Niro, there's nothing there that indicates that they ever feel conflicted about what they're doing. It was almost like a throwback to really cheap genre films like, what's the one, the Charles Bronson one? Death Wish.
I've never seen that.
I was going to say Death Note, and I realized that would not be correct. But
Brown
yeah,
Note.
it wants to have this sort of, you know, morally complex, heavy narrative, but doesn't do it justice. And so you just end up getting the beats or the bones of that sort of film, but presented cheaply and without there being anything to think about. So yeah, it was just, vapid's a great way to describe it. It's a film that exists. It seems like it only exists to put Pacino and De Niro back on screen together. And I was thinking about it. I'm conflicted about this film because on the one hand, you know, we should appreciate this. This is one of 4 opportunities we'll have to see De Niro and Pacino together on screen during this entire
106. Yep.
100, whatever. Yeah. So yes, they elevate the film. They make it a lot better than it would have been with literally anyone else in those lead roles. However, looking at it from the other end, I just think like, this is what they got. Like, didn't they deserve more? Didn't this script, the direction, whatever, didn't it all just deserve a little more care put into it for the milestone that it should have been? And it just really falls flat in that regard. So it's like, yeah, it's great to see them on screen and they have a lot of time together and like they seem to have, you know, great chemistry, but it's in service of this. Like,
yeah, I agree.
Oh,
it's very
man.
strange.
Yeah.
It's a really strange film. I'd like to do some reading about like how it got made. There's not a lot of information on Wikipedia. I think understandably it's like not a very good movie and I'm sure it's been watched
Not a big
by like
fan
100
base
people ever.
Let's check r/righteous kill.
Yeah, I'd like to know kind of why this exists. It's fascinating to me that they would do this together, and it would be, I don't know, it's just fascinating that like they're in a movie together every 20 years, and this is one of them. You know?
Yes.
It's just like it's really odd. Really odd stuff. So yeah, it didn't work for me from like a literary perspective. I just don't know really what we're supposed to feel about it, and I think that we feel that way because there is a tension between what the filmmaker wants you to feel and what we are forced to feel as viewers, just based on the just very basic like what we're seeing and hearing on screen.
Right.
I don't know. What else do you want to say about this? I feel like there isn't much else to say from my perspective.
I think
we can talk about De Niro's performance. We should talk about that.
Well, before we talk about that, the other thing I'll say about the narrative, too, that didn't work for me was we do get to hear the killer's thoughts through the journal entries being read by De Niro. And I think that would have been the way to present whatever moral ambiguity there is about these extrajudicial killings. But every time we get narration from De Niro, you know, everything is just him feeling more emboldened and feeling more like he has to do this and he just has to keep pushing. And so it's like, okay, we're not even learning anything new and interesting about him. He just keeps going, I got away with 1, I'm going to do 2, now I'm going to make it 3, and so on. And it's just so uninteresting.
And then at the end, Pacino even says to him when they're having their little like debrief before he kills him, he's like, yeah, killing those people was the only time I was ever happy. And it's like, okay. Like, I don't know, how am I supposed to feel about
right,
this?
what a
Like,
rich
so
character
weird.
study. One of cinema's greatest characters.
Yeah. So De Niro's performance. You know, I guess it was good. It was my least favorite performance of the 4 films we've seen.
Oh,
him in,
yeah,
for sure.
that's an interesting point because we've seen so few so far that we can make that comparison. So you think the worst one, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Undeniably, I think. Do you disagree?
No, I don't disagree. But I think so much of it has to do with the quality of the writing. I think he shows up.
Yeah.
I think he put in the effort. He had the charm. He had the rapport with Pacino. I didn't think he was phoning it in or anything. I worry that we're going to see a lot of him phoning it in down the road. But this to me felt like a totally like good De Niro performance. It just wasn't a very good, movie. He wasn't a very good character.
It was a good performance. I thought he made some great faces.
Oh, yes.
I especially noted there's a scene where Carla Gugino, she gets a poem in her house. Oh, we didn't talk about that. What was up with that? Who left the poem in her house? I mean, I guess it had to be Pacino.
Yeah.
But why? And we need to go back and talk about the... I think you're going to want to edit this back so it's
I'm
like
not
sort of
going to do that,
organically
man.
where it should be
I'm
in the
not gonna
conversation.
I'm not gonna go through
but
that.
like, okay, so what was up with the Carla Gugino rape and assault scene?
Why
Like,
did-
what
you were
was the
leading the
point of
recap,
that?
man. I wasn't trying to cut you off all the time.
No, but I want to. But I said we were going to go back to it, and then I forgot to go back to it. So
Oh,
now we know
okay.
the twist. So it should make sense, right?
Yes.
Why? What was the strategic value to Pacino for doing that? Like, was he trying to make it seem like it was John Leguizamo because John Leguizamo was kind of beat up from some previous thing? Like, this made no sense to me. I did not understand why Carla Gugino's character got assaulted.
I also have questions about this because around the same time, we don't know Pacino's the killer yet, but
Yep.
we hear the confession. He says, I want to do something unforgivable. At the same time that, he's doing the Carla Gugino assault, we're also seeing shots of him targeting John Leguizamo in his home. So he does a drive-by and shoots, at John Leguizamo, doesn't hit him, but scares the hell out of him, of course. And then we see the Carla Gugino thing. And so I was confused because I thought when the killer says, I'm going to do something unforgivable, he's talking about killing Leguizamo to get him off his trail. But he really means assaulting Carla Gugino. And yes, I didn't understand it didn't seem like there was any tactical reason for that. It did a really poor job of setting it up.
It was absurd. So you
It
and
was
me
a
agree.
confusing
So
moment, yeah.
Maybe a kind listener, if you got any righteous kill heads here in the fandom, maybe you can explain this. I would love to understand. Please email us at ourherodeniro@gmail.com. So there was that. But anyway, what made me think of that was De Niro makes some great faces, and my favorite face that he made was during the scene where Gugino gets the poem in her house, and they're having a conversation about it, and he just it was incredible. It was an incredible Robert De Niro face. I wish we could flash it up on the screen, but
Yeah, it's a
unfortunately,
shame. He makes some good
this is
ones.
an audio only. So
Yeah.
were there any De Niro moments that really worked for you in the movie, or was it just good overall for you?
No, it was good overall. I just thought his characterization was so poor because of the way they paint him as this hothead. I think one of the things that didn't work for me with the film's narrative was the dynamic between Pacino and De Niro because they are the same age. Like the way that Pacino talks about De Niro and he's like, oh, you were my role model, blah, 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 blah. I always looked up to you. And I'm like, you're the same age. You might be older. Well, I get that, if they came up in the force together, that maybe he would look to him as sort of a big brother or whatever, but that didn't quite work for me. And the way that De Niro was characterized is like being this real hothead, whatever, like, I don't know. I think it might have worked better with someone 20 years younger, but it was weird to have like two aging detectives going through this, whatever. Pacino's going through this metamorphosis. Like it's happening so late in life and the justification is so flimsy. Because Pacino only ever feels just like excited to do it. Didn't really.
Yeah. Oh, that's rich. So there you go. That's Righteous Kill.
Yeah, what would you give it a rating? What would you give it out of 5 stars?
No, it's
the old
it's so hard. It's so hard to say. I think I'm kind of torn between 1 and 1.5 stars.
Really?
Wow. What about you? Where
By
you at
far
on
the
this?
worst. So 1 or 1.5. I thought this would be the case. I'm warmer on this film than you were. So I do not want to hear the snob allegations from you or anyone else that I fucking know in real life. Like I am a man of the people. I was thinking 2. But you know what? I for a moment I did think 2.5. I'm going to land on 2. It's not a good film. I want to be clear about that. It's not a good film, and I don't really think it's worth seeking out to watch. But
What'd you give Ezra?
2.5.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Ezra's a lot better than this.
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
There's a tilt factor here.
Okay.
Righteous Kill is a bad film. It is elevated by De Niro and Pacino's performances, by them being the stars.
Yep.
I had a blast watching them for the entire film, and I would prefer to watch gritty crime drama than whatever Ezra was, the cloying, sappy family road trip dramedy.
Yeah, I love that kind of shit.
I
Yeah.
hate that kind of shit, and two, there was only 9 minutes of De Niro, so like failure on both counts.
That's fair.
But
Yep.
but it's a much more competently made film than Righteous Kill. So I think overall it's a better movie, better story. Righteous Kill, like, yeah, I'd give it a little extra just because I like that genre. I like those actors. It was a totally fine way to kill an hour and 41 minutes, but it wasn't good. You have to be in the mood for that sort of late 2000s cheapness, and that paycheck era for both of those actors. So I'm landing on a 2. I think it is the worst film we've seen so far, but I didn't hate it.
I think it's important here to add some context for my scoring as well. So 1 star is my lowest score because I'm adhering to my Letterboxd scoring framework, and I cannot give a half star because that is the score that I gave to Star Wars. Rise of Skywalker, and I committed in my
Episode
Star
9,
Wars Rise
baby.
of Skywalker review that I would never give any other movie a half star. So if I was to give this 1 star, I think it would be the lowest score I can give. And so for that reason, I am leaning toward 1.5 stars. I do think we'll see worse things than this in our hero.
I want to revise my rating. I think I might give it a 2.5. I think it might be a low 2.5. I just think like it's so inoffensive. It's just there. It exists, and yeah, it's kind of bad, but it flew right by, and you got to see some great performances in the leads. Think about all the movies of this sort, the entire industry making films like this that don't have De Niro and Pacino caliber talent, who get like, a Gerard Butler or whatever. I think he's actually a pretty good actor, but like, what I mean? Like someone several notches.
We are really like coming out for Gerard Butler. There's nothing wrong with him.
Or like another example, who honestly is also a good actor, is Aaron Eckhart. Harvey Dent from The Dark Knight. His career didn't really take off afterwards, so he's just been a slew of like cheap action films since then. Like, I don't know, I'd rather see it with like top tier, getting to see De Niro and Pacino. Like, I think I might give it a soft 2.5.
All right, yeah,
That's
give
where I'm
it
landing.
whatever
That's
you
where I'm
want. I
landing.
think I'm landing on 1.5 stars.
Okay, so 1.5 and 2.5.
So,
Not exactly a hot recommendation from either of us.
No.
But do you have any recommendations to watch instead of Righteous
I
Kill?
do. And I actually have to revise my recommendation, so I will share the one I came in with.
Oh, okay.
And then I'll share the one I'm landing on based on our discussion of this podcast.
Right.
So my first recommendation is it's kind of a joke. It's a serious recommendation, but making it as my recommendation is sort of a joke. Instead of this, I think you should watch Heat. It's it's an hour longer, but it is also a gritty crime drama, and it really it really shows you less is more. I mean, like, what do you think De Niro and Pacino have in total screen time together in that film?
Just a
Like,
few
maybe
minutes.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
And you feel so much more about those characters and about their relationship in that 5 minutes than you feel at all in this. And it's due to the quality of the writing and the quality of the writing and the direction. Heat is so incredible. Nobody who's listening to this should actually watch it. If you haven't seen it, you should wait.
Yes,
Until
I would not recommend a De Niro film.
Heat. The Our Hero De Niro Heat episode, which could happen at any time. It could be our next episode.
That's true.
We'll see what we roll. But what I'm landing on as my recommendation, which I'm actually very serious about, is Justified. So I think if you're if you're looking for something to watch, the whole series of Justified is on Hulu. It's an FX show. It is like so like John Landgraf, right? Mayor of TV. He's the president of FX. I think that Justified was it was a great show during the peak of peak TV, like 2010 to 2015. Timothy Oliphant. What's the guy who plays Boyd's name?
Walton Goggins.
Walton Goggins. Yep, the two of them. Incredible on-screen chemistry. I think similar like on-screen chemistry to De Niro and Pacino. Fantastic TV actors. Like, it's just such a good show. And apparently, this guy, I already forgot his name, John Avnet. I think he directed like about 15% of the episodes. So if you if you go watch the show, you're going to see a lot of him putting out stuff that's a lot better than this movie in Justified. So I'd strongly recommend you just watch the pilot.
That's a big one.
For a crime drama to watch. I mean, just watch the pilot.
Watch it entire
if you like it, you like it. If you don't, I mean, it's a great pilot. It works as an hour-long
That's
movie.
a good series.
So,
I second that recommendation.
Yep.
Great series.
All right, what do you got? What's yours this week?
I am honoring the fact that this is one of 4 Al Pacino appearances we're going to get in this entire project.
Everyone wants my Dunkachino. Can't get enough of my Dunkachino.
So I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, what are films that I would rather be watching instead of Righteous Kill? And I landed on a Pacino film. So I landed on the 2002 psychological thriller film Insomnia, directed by Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
So this, I hadn't seen this until I think last year for the first time. It's a remake of a 1997 Norwegian film and stars Al Pacino as this detective, an LA homicide detective who's sent to investigate a murder in Alaska. And he's dealing with insomnia for, reasons. So it's basically like following him through that case, his psychological deterioration, and trying to pursue this serial killer. And I mean, it's great cast, obviously great direction from Christopher Nolan. I think it's one of his lesser films overall, but it's a really good thriller. We get Robin Williams. Oh yeah. We get Robin Williams in a rare villain role, and he's fantastic in it. R.I.P.
He's so good. Yep.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I'm most excited about, you get that Wally Pfister cinematography, and it is
really
as far away from Righteous Kill as you could be. Like, it is such a beautiful, like, gorgeous film. Lots of great, like, deep gold colors, great Arctic cinematography. The sun never sets at that, at that time, like when the narrative is set. And so you just get a lot of great shots, really good Pacino performance. He does not phone it in at all. He really puts the effort in, and it's just a really solid thriller. Just can't go wrong with it. Insomnia. Watch that before you watch Righteous Kill.
I also watched Insomnia for the first time last year, and I agree. I loved that movie. Thought it was great, and I think you should definitely watch it before you watch this one. So, great recommendation.
I appreciate that. Now it's time. Time for the most stressful part of this.
Right?
Yeah, it's my turn.
All right. Oh, is it? Did I do it last week? Oh, it was me last week. You're right. It is your turn. I got all ready to do it. I pulled up the random number generator and everything, but I guess it's you. All right.
It is. Yeah. So I'm gonna roll this. I'm a little worried because I feel like I had a great role last time with The Untouchables. It was like a really good film, but one that I hadn't seen before, and that's what I want. I don't want Heat.
I'm holding out for Shark Tale.
You want Shark Tale? Okay, I will settle for Shark Tale or
if we get Shark Tale, I'm watching it tonight, and we're recording on Thursday. I'm so excited for Shark Tale.
Listen, I would do that. I saw that when it came out. I don't remember it, and I'm sure it's not very good. But
I'm sure it's terrible. Yep.
Are you ready? I'm going to go ahead and roll.
I'm ready. Yep.
I rolled 101. Savage Salvation.
Oh man.
Oh my God. This is a film from 2022. It is an American thriller film directed by Randall Emmett, never heard of him, starring Jack Houston, Robert De Niro, and John Malkovich.
Oh my God, this looks so bad. Are you looking at the poster?
I'm looking at the poster says it all. It's just if you feel...
Holy shit.
If you want a little preview of things to come, Google the poster for Savage Salvation, the tagline of which is, "Payback is dirty." This is going to be bad. I can feel it. But we're going to get John Malkovich. I'm excited.
I don't know. You think he's in it much?
It's
not.
I bet De Niro isn't in it much either. I bet it's going to be one of those films. He gets like 2 scenes where he's like sitting down or whatever.
Yeah. I don't know. A Google search for how long he's in it doesn't turn up an immediate result.
I don't want to know. Never tell me.
Whereas for well, I wouldn't have told you what it was. I know you don't want to know. But the point is, like, when I searched for that for Ezra, it popped up right away. So, like, maybe it's not as notably short a screen time as it was in Ezra. There isn't an immediate Google result where somebody's like, yeah, he's not fucking in this movie at all. Like, they have it on lock for Ezra. Like, there were, like, a lot of results for that Google search. Like, he's not in this one.
A lot of discussion in the Ezra community about that.
So, I mean, I think this is going to be quite bad, but it's in a period of time where it could be good. I don't know, what's it got on Letterboxd?
I don't know. I'm sure it's low.
And I think that if you go to the page, you'll enjoy seeing the picture that is the like header for the movie. I would really encourage you to go look at it. I think it's going to make you smile. It's going to make you excited to watch it.
Oh God. Yeah, look up Savage Salvation on Letterboxd. You'll see it has a 2.2 out of 5.
I think let's wrap it up. It's been a great discussion.
Yeah, we'll see. On that note, time to end this. Follow us on Letterboxd. I'm Mike back at you. He's Mike the Fab. Email us at ourherodeniro@gmail.com because, we want listener mail. I want to answer some questions. Ask us about anything.
I would love to get some listener mail.
Oh, wouldn't that be great?
Have you been checking?
Dealer's choice. Yeah, there's nothing coming in, man. Yeah.
Yeah, man. We've released 2 episodes. They've probably been listened to cumulatively like 12 times.
Yeah, and plus they'd have to make it to the end. 9
of those listeners were our friends and family.
Well, they should send some emails.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Mike. No relation.
No relation, of course. And we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, see you later. Thanks for sticking around.